Welcome back. President Trump had a lot to say last evening regarding the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Take a listen.
I'm also working tirelessly to end the savage conflict in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense. With no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes. Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
We've received word today from CIA Director John Ratcliffe that the United States is also pausing certain types of intelligence cooperation with the Ukrainian military. That follows the pause on actual military materiel and other forms of aid being sent to the country. We've also heard President Trump clearly put on the table easing sanctions against Russian companies.
Are you looking at relieving Russian sanctions if there is a peace deal?
Well, we're going to make deals with everybody to get this war, including Europe and European nations.
President Trump seems to be clamping down on Ukraine on one hand and then offering access to markets to Russia on the other. This should incentivize both countries to become partners for peace and prosperity. So what does peace look like in the wake of these recent developments? Joining me now to discuss the impact of President Trump's landmark speech is the executive director of the American Conservative, Curt Mills, and retired DoD intel operative, president of Project Sentinel and the London Center for Policy Research, and New York Times bestselling author Tony Shaffer. Curt, I'll start with you. What do you assess as the major impact of President Trump's remarks on these ongoing negotiations?
Yeah, so I mean, it was the first in an enormous sort of post-cap reaction to the disastrous meeting with Zelensky that occurred last week. Disastrous, of course, on the Ukrainian president's part. It looks like the Ukrainians are going to come back to the table. He was coached over the weekend by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Emmanuel Macron, the President of France. And what is not clear is whether or not the original deal, the original minerals deal, is still on the table, or whether or not the White House is going to try to extract more concessions. As of today, I mean, we've seen this sort of blueprint of what they could do. They could stop the sanctions. They could stop the arms shipment. They could cut off the money today and just wash Americans' hands clean of this. I think what is most likely to happen is some sort of negotiation for a ceasefire and then proceed from there. What the open question is whether or not Zelensky would be party to those negotiations, because Trump himself seems to be favoring this Steve Witkoff person to just cut deals in the dead of night. And, you know, from my perspective, that works just fine.
Steve Witkoff is a brilliant negotiator, and he does pretty well out there operating. Colonel Shaffer, I want to get your perspective on this decision to pause the intelligence sharing. What do you think the practical effect of that is?
It's enormous. We've also pulled out support troops from theater. There's actually movement of people and stopping the logistics. And also, we've retasked 134 satellites. So we're sending not only a signal regarding Ukraine, we're sending a signal to Europe, to NATO. We have our own issues to focus on. By the way, those satellite missions are going to be focused on our southwest border where we do have issues. Matt, what President Trump's trying to do is return the whole situation to using the language of peace, which is commerce. One of the best things he could do to send a strong signal to both the Europeans and Russia is lower and stop the energy sanctions, the oil sanctions against Russia. That would instantly show goodwill. It would instantly free up markets. It would drop our oil prices. That would be a good step forward regarding good faith. Zelensky's not ready to come back to the table. Zelensky's being coached, as just stipulated, by the Europeans. The Europeans are still wanting to send troops into Ukraine as a tripwire to get us involved. So, Matt, my advice, if the president's listening, go for the relief of sanctions, continue down the path of restricting intelligence and moving our assets out of theater.
Curt Mills, if that happens, do you think it would end the war?
I think it looked. I mean, look, the Europeans tried to do this summit about 10 days ago in Paris, and they didn't really. Nothing really came out of it. Humiliating details have come out about the British military's readiness. It looks like they have basically under 20,000 troops that even go into a combat zone. That's their own assessment. So I think if the Americans pull out without, pull out the weapons, pull out the finances, it looks like the war ends. And I don't think the Europeans have really indicated anything to the opposite. The most bellicose major European leader is probably the incoming German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz. But again, the Germans can't spend much more than they want to do. They have this sort of contraption in their budget that doesn't let them deficit spend. And the Germans, of course, haven't militarized since the 40s.
Colonel Schaefer, if the war ends because of the incentives you've discussed, where do you expect the final lines to be drawn, particularly in the east and in the south of Ukraine?
As Pete Hegseth has said, there's going to have to be territorial concessions. I think the war would end where the basic lines are right now. And by the way, the Russians are winning. There's no reason right now for them to enter into any sort of ceasefire because they don't have to. So I believe Zelensky's best hope, if he remains the president of Ukraine, is to listen to President Trump, walk out of the situation with a guarantee that we, the United States, will invest with our resources. We will be the ones who can help guarantee the future peace of Ukraine. The militarized fashion that Macron, that Stallmer and the Europeans are proposing, they can't fund, as just stipulated, I agree. And it would be a complete unneeded antagonism of Putin and Russia to continue a war and see people die for no reason.
Sure. I've got to leave it there. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer and Curt Mills of the American Conservative. And I'll just say this. I've seen a lot of polling suggesting that more people in the country are coming around to the skepticism of this war that has been reflected in the American Conservative since its inception. So great reporting on your part, and look forward to chatting with you both again soon, okay?
Thanks, Matt.